like video was not really feasible in 99. So, but money is low bandwidth and digital, effectively, mostly digital. So it's like, what can we do to make money work better? And like money, in my view, is essentially an information system for labor allocation. So it has no power in and of itself. It's like a database for for guiding people as to what they should do. And so you can think of banks as a set of heterogeneous databases with that are actually not very secure, and certainly the monetary system, the transfer system of checks is very insecure. Still is insecure. So are credit cards, and it's still mostly batch processing, and it was entirely batch processing that day. So it was not. So payments were. Money was this like heterogeneous, high latency, low security collection of databases. That's what banks are. And so just from an information theory standpoint, this should be something that can be much better if it can be real time, secure, and just very fast. Essentially, it's just one real time database. So it's like, okay, let's try to build that. So that's what X.com was. And then at the time, I also thought what we should try to do is just do all the financial things as well, not just payments. I still think that's really what PayPal should have done, but whatever, it's water under the bridge at this point. And then there was a company that was formed around the same time called Confinity, which was Peter Thiel, Max Levchin, and Luke Nosek, David Sachs, Ken Howery, a number of those. And at X.com, there's also like Jeremy Stoppelman, and who created Yelp, Roloff Botha, who then went on to run Sequoia and fund YouTube. That was at X.com. So we just had this like two companies with like a crazy amount of talent, X.com and Confinity. And Confinity started as a Palm Pilot cryptography company, back when you'd communicate via the infrared port of a Palm Pilot.
I remember that.
Yeah, I had one Palm Pilot.
So it was like, so you could basically communicate crypto tokens between Palm Pilots using the infrared port and then reconcile them on a PC. Now, obviously, they evolved to go in the payments direction as well. And we were both in Palo Alto, like literally a block away from each other. I think at one point we were briefly even in the same building. It was, so we were just competing with each other like maniacs. And then we had a coffee on University Avenue, and said, hey, why don't we just combine our efforts, or we're just going to bludgeon each other to death here. So we merged Confinity and X.com, and raised $100 million in the space of 3 weeks in March of 2000.
Wow.
Yeah, and in April the market went into free fall.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
the 2000.
yeah, and it was like,
I remember that.
that was insane.
I know.
And we kind of thought it was going to go into free fall, but we're like, we better get this thing done fast. We're both going to die. So, so X.com was technically the acquirer of Confinity, but it was a 50.1 or 49.9 or something like that. And then there was a lot of drama. There was so much drama at X.com. And the company was called X.com for about a year, and then we changed the company name to the product name. The product was PayPal. But all the incorporation documents and everything is all my incorporation documents.
Who came up with the PayPal name?
I actually don't know.
People call you guys the PayPal Mafia now, you know. Thiel wrote that in his book.
I don't know who did the PayPal. I was never a huge fan of PayPal as a name. The reason being that I thought it made sense for the company to kind of
Broader.
be much broader. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you limit yourself to payments, then necessarily people want to transfer money out of the system. And as soon as they transfer money out of the system, the efficiency of the database drops dramatically, because now you're in the traditional banking world. So if you just offer all the things that, if you just basically address all the reasons why people are taking money out of the PayPal system, so you have to provide them with checks so that you have a bridge to the legacy transaction system. You got to provide them with a debit card, provide them with the ability to get a loan and that kind of thing. But these are all ancillary to accelerating the velocity and accuracy and security of payments. Then if basically PayPal would be where all the money is. It would just suck all the money out of the banks, and the banks would go away.
Yeah.
So any plan you're gonna do with the X.com?
I wrote if they just execute the business plan, the product plan I wrote in July 2000. Let's just do that. But I talked to them several times, but they didn't do it.
So why did you and PayPal kind of part ways? What was really the drama that led to that, separation ultimately?
Well, things were very dicey in 2000.
Yeah.
Companies were dying like all over the place. So I was CEO of the combined company, and we're doing quite well from a growth standpoint. We were like adding 100,000 users a month type of thing, which back then was a lot.
Yeah.
But financially things were tough, and we needed to raise a financing round. We were also there were some technical questions around what code architecture would we go with. And then there was also a branding question. Like I said, I think we should not use PayPal as a brand, because this is not consistent with being where all the money is. You want a centralized database. So I was kind of against the PayPal branding, and I wanted to do a bunch of things that seemed extremely risky, and I think those things would have worked out, but at a time when companies are dropping like flies, and I'm proposing that we do all these things that sound very risky. This is just much too scary for the rest of the team.
You seem to be attracted to crazy ideas that other people are like. I think the autopilot one is a great example where everyone's kind of trying this spatial approach to self-driving. They're doing Waymo for 10 years, nobody cares, and you come out and say, hey, we think vision is the way forward, and deep learning and vision, will take us all the way there. How do you find the courage inside to, people have to be coming up to you all the time and, thinking that you're an idiot or it's never going to happen, and how do you find that in yourself to go through all that resistance and still be confident in your thesis?
I try to be hyper rational, so it's not it's just like if the reasoning fits and you're not violating laws of physics or something, then that's the thing you should do. So, and I guess the other day, if we lost all the money, I wouldn't, as long as we didn't lose other people's money, I guess I just lose my money, I don't mind. These things just don't seem that crazy to me. So, I think if PayPal had executed the plan that I wanted to execute on, I think it would probably be the most valuable company in the world.
Yeah.
It would be called X, but it would be the most valuable company in the world. On the other hand, now that's not all good though. On the other hand, then a lot of super talented people would have stayed, and because PayPal got acquired by eBay not long after, there was the PayPal coup at the end of 2000. 18 months later, it was acquired by eBay. So, and then, but if you think of the companies that came out of PayPal, the so-called PayPal mafia, YouTube, Steve and Chad created YouTube, Jerry Sobelman created Yelp, Peter created Palantir and a bunch of other things. There's David Sachs created this company. and Reid Hoffman created LinkedIn.
Wow. It's almost like all that market cap still exists, but now it's allocated on all these other tech companies instead of X.com.
Yeah, so in retrospect, I don't know, sometimes like it's maybe a good thing that X wasn't, or PayPal didn't achieve those things, because all these other companies would have at least been delayed, or may not have existed.
There's definitely been kind of a resurgence in interest as we get into kind of cryptographic, money and Bitcoin and all that, of like interest in this idea, and it's interesting, like software hasn't eaten the banking industry yet. Software's eaten a lot of industries. There's some that it just hasn't, and banking's still there,
Stripe's eating them slowly, but they're doing a pretty good job. The banks are in trouble if it's not Stripe, it'll be somebody else.
And you love code, but you don't seem to be as bullish on Bitcoin. Do you have could you break down like why? Because you're talking about this big database that's more secure for faster transactions. It seems like Bitcoin's hitting at least some of those.
I'm neither here nor there on Bitcoin. Yeah.
What did you think when you read like Satoshi's white paper for the first time? Were you like, oh, it's pretty interesting? Or
that was pretty clever. It's just like the things. Yeah. This always gets like the crypto people angry, but there are transactions that are not within the bounds of the law, and there are obviously many laws in different countries, and normally cash is used for these transactions, but in order for illegal transactions to occur, the cash must also be used for legal transactions. You need an illegal to legal bridge. That's where crypto comes in.
So is it kind of the darknet stuff?
It can't be entirely dark, because otherwise how do you buy normal stuff? And cash these days is used just much rarer. It's hard. It's like increasingly difficult to use cash. Some places you can't use cash at all.
Yeah.
So there's a forcing function for transactions that are illegal, quasi-legal, and in some cases legal. But it's got to have some. It's got to be both legal and illegal. It doesn't count otherwise. Otherwise, you simply it can't just be transactions within an illegal economy. Because how do you buy food in a house or something? You must have a legal to illegal bridge. So where I see crypto as is effectively as a replacement for cash, but not as a replacement as a primary. I do not see crypto being the primary database. So now this is sometimes taken being like I'm being judgmental about crypto, and it's actually, I think there's a lot of things that are illegal that shouldn't be illegal. But so it's not as though. I think that sometimes governments just have too many laws about that. They shouldn't have so many things that are illegal.
Didn't you say like on Mars there'd be less laws?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Do you also propose a direct democracy on Mars?
I think probably that's the best. Probably it's the best thing.
Mars technocracy.
The Mars technocracy.
Yes.
And you want to make laws super short and simple, right?
Well, yeah, if people can't understand laws, then then what's usually going to happen is some special interest is going to bamboozle the public with long laws.
Yep.
And then the law is, like reading this law is like the size of Lord of the Rings, but a very boring version of it.
Like the dealership thing is just crazy to me. Like America's supposed to be competitive, free market. It's weird, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, just so you want to keep the laws short and give them some kind of sunset period so that they don't just stay there forever. Otherwise, just accumulate over time and just eventually it'll be unwieldy. So the laws should have some time frame associated with them. They automatically go away. It's just keep the laws short to avoid trickery and sort of special interests that ultimately does not benefit the public. And then I think direct democracy is less susceptible to corruption than representative democracy. So Corruption just being like, to what degree is this action being taken that do not serve the interests of the population? Do not result in a net increase in population happiness as a whole. So that's why I think probably direct is better. And then just have things in real time. So if you want to vote on something, you can vote on it real fast. Probably make it. I would say make it easier to get rid of laws than to put them in, because these things tend to have a lot of inertia, and so have a bias towards having laws go away and not be there. So like maybe it takes 60% to put a law in place, but 40% to remove it, or something like that. Yeah. I mean, let's try it. See what happens.
The bills are extremely long that they pass. No one reads them.
Yeah.
Hardly anyone in Congress has read the bill, and even if they've read the bill, if you quiz them on the details, they wouldn't know it.
They'll find their page. They're like, "Oops."
Yeah, there's like, tell me what's this. There was no idea.
Seems kind of alarming that that's like the status quo and everyone just accepts it. But
yeah, these laws tend to be written by industry groups as well. So they'll write the law and then interact with the congressional staff but most of the work will be done by the industry groups, and so they're going to write laws that entrench their position.
it's like the people or the players buying the ref, like you were saying earlier.
Exactly.
It's that exact thing.
Right, so you get the regulatory capture of yeah. The players shouldn't be paying the ref salary type of thing. Well, the ref shouldn't be thinking, I'm going to retire and get paid by the players. So it's kind of amazing that it works as well as it does, given all these issues. So then PayPal, I ended up getting malaria anyway in 2001. 2001.
Yeah, tell us about this. The malaria thing.
That was you went on vacation, right?
Yeah, we went to South Africa with Kimball, actually.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then came back and had like a near-death case of malaria.
Yeah, grew up in South Africa. We'd go to the bushveld all the time, to the what you guys call safari, and you just had a house in the bush. So you just go there every few weeks or so. I don't think we ever took malaria tablets.
We didn't have malaria in those days. I think there was a drought and then a flood and then suddenly there were mosquitoes.
Yeah, right. And so we were told to, and we did take malaria tablets. You took them as well, and when he got back, he was in Stanford and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. Our uncle, who's a doctor in South Africa, is like, he has malaria, and it's like, no, he doesn't have malaria. We checked. So, check again. Malaria kind of hides in the body, and then
that's why they wouldn't believe it.
So this was after PayPal got started?
Oh, this is 2001. So it was sort of after the PayPal coup. So I was on the PayPal board, and I was providing sort of product advice and whatnot. But in December, late December 2000, went on a trip to South Africa. Came back early January 2001, and I had a severe case of malaria. Almost died.
I sat next to his bed for about 5 days. He's yellow and just tubes going in and out of him. Just sat early morning till late at night, just waiting to see. And then they said to me, get some pajamas for him. And the closest store was some like Dress for Less or something. So I just got him some pajamas, and then the next thing, after 5 days, he woke up and he says, so there's bunnies on my pajamas. I think he was bitter. I think they were bunnies or ducks or something, because that was what I could get. And then I knew he was better.
You were sleeping. I mean, like it affected your brain that harshly.
Yeah, no, it was bad. It's really bad.
So that changed your perspective? How did it influence you after that?
I don't know. I don't think it changed me that much. Would you say?
I don't think it changed you.
No, I don't think it did.
Recovered and went back to
yeah.
But how many times have you been on vacation?
I lost like 50 pounds, so it was great.
Yeah.
So no more vacations though.
Well, yeah, it took me like almost 6 months to get back to normal.
Wow.
So, and then in 2001, I was thinking about what to do next, and I thought there's like sustainable energy, like basically electric cars, solar, space, and then a friend of mine asked me, so what are you gonna do next? And I said, well, so I would love to do something in space, but I don't think there's anything that a private individual could do in space. But at least I'm going to go on the NASA website and find out when people are going to Mars. And I go on the NASA website, and it's nowhere to be found. And so I was like, well, this is pretty weird. And then I discovered that it was actually a NASA policy not to talk about it.
Really?
Yeah, at the time.
Huh. Why was that, do you think?
What I was told is that when George Bush the First when he was elected, he said he asked NASA to put together a plan to send people to Mars in 90 days. They came back with a plan, and it was $500 billion. And it says, well, this is like political suicide. So then after that, talk of manned missions to Mars were banned. That's what I saw. Yeah. So anyway, so it's like, well, maybe there's something that can be done here to get the public excited about going to Mars. And if I get the public excited, then they will vote NASA to have more funding. And so the original idea for SpaceX was just to have a philanthropic mission to Mars.
Yeah, actually, just started as a graphic of a pot plant. Just need to get the pot plant to Mars. It was like an inspiration.
Sure.
Just as a way to prove to the world that it could be done.
Yeah. So the mission was called Mars Oasis. It was seeds and dehydrated nutrient gel that would hydrate upon landing. You get this great picture of green plants on a red background. Be like the first sort of life as we know it on Mars, and you can also learn a lot about what does it take to keep plants alive and have a little miniature greenhouse on surface of Mars. So that's what I initially pursued as like a way to basically increase NASA's budget. It wasn't let's create a space company. It was how do we get NASA's budget increased so we can go send people to Mars. And I was trying to figure out how to get this thing launched. And the rockets, the European and US rockets were too expensive, and I couldn't afford them. So I went to Russia to try to buy some ICBMs in 2001, literally. And they kept raising the price on me, and it was being quite difficult. And I said, I could afford to pay $9 million for an ICBM, but not 20, because I figured we need to do 2 of these missions, because odds are good that one would fail, and then it could have a negative impact potentially. So that was pretty weird, being in Moscow trying to buy ICBMs in 2001.
That's amazing.
How do you negotiate to buy an ICBM?
Yeah, I call up the military and say, well, they got to get they got to get rid of these things anyway because of the arms reduction treaties. So it's like, if you're going to throw it away, I'll take it off your hands. They have to. It was like SS-18 Geneva. It was the biggest nuclear missile in the Russian fleet, and but anyway, they're decommission these things. So why not just sell me them instead? And then every time I talk to them, the price would go up, and I'm like, this is not good. Because so even if once we do a deal, I'm probably going to get shafted afterwards too. And this is the pre-deal shafting. It's like, what's going to be after, or it's after I've given the money, then it's not going to be good. So, and then I started looking into it as like, why do rockets cost so much, and and so there's nothing fundamental about why they should cost so much. If you add up the materials, and say it's not like the raw materials cost that much. You really just need to figure out a smart way to get the materials in that shape. And then we need to make rockets reusable. So, like any form of transport, if it's not reusable, it's extremely expensive. Mm-hmm. If cars were single use, and you needed a round trip, if you bought a car for $20,000, then your round trip will cost you $40,000.
That's true. That's true.
No, it's crazy. So the same thing's true for aircraft and boats and rockets and everything. So, the rockets were expensive even as expendable things, but then they were also not reusable. So there's no way we're going to have a city on Mars unless we can have reusable, low-cost, reliable rockets. That's fundamentally the issue. So I came to the conclusion that even if this Mars Oasis mission was successful, it would still not result in it would not materially further the goal of being a multi-planet species, because the rocket technology was not good enough, and it was not getting better. In fact, it was arguably getting worse. So the real thing that needed to be solved here is reusable rocketry and lowering the cost of access to space. And that's like, okay, well, I'm going to try to do that. So then I got SpaceX started in early 2002, basically. I was living in Palo Alto at the time, but most of the engineering expertise was in Southern California, so that's why I moved to LA.
Did you ever have any, like, even inkling of imagination that you could be doing, a dozen launches a year and being contracted with NASA? Is that even like it?
I thought that was I thought we had, 10% chance of success or something like that.
You ended up being chief engineer, right?
Yeah.
Because no one wanted to give up their secure jobs with ULA and something at the beginning.
Exactly. I actually tried to hire. Basically, there'd been a number of attempts at doing a sort of a private rocket company or commercial rocket company, and they're all failed effectively, and that's to the degree that it was like a joke in the aerospace industry. Like, how do you make a large fortune in the rocket? Start with how do you make a small fortune in the rocket industry? Start with a large one. Pretty soon it's going to be small.
Business.
Yeah, they told me that joke so many times. I would just jump to the punchline, it was very hard to recruit people because I had not built any physical hardware before. And I kept being called internet guy for the longest time, for ages. Finally, I made for the first 10 years they calling me internet guy, or basically internet entrepreneur / fool. He's trying to start a rocket company. What an idiot. That was generally how it went. So it was quite hard to recruit people, and especially if somebody's got like a secure job at Boeing or Lockheed or something like that. Then trying to recruit them to be chief engineer of a startup rocket company was hopeless. So basically, nobody who was good was willing to join, and there was no point in hiring somebody who wasn't good. So I ended up being chief engineer, which is So the first 3 launches failed, and probably if I'd been better, then we would have gotten to orbit sooner. So it took me a while to learn all these things. So
from books or
books and talking to people.
Did you go to Utah and talk to anybody, like at ATK Orbital?
Oh yeah, I visited ATK. Yeah. Orbital is Dallas, Virginia. Yeah. So yeah, I visited ATK, visited Orbital. And Orbital had a success with the solid rocket based Pegasus, but they'd also gotten like an 8 launch deal from DARPA. So okay, if you're starting off with basically an 8 launch deal from DARPA, that's a good situation. We did not have a launch deal from anyone. And Pegasus is there's some clever engineering with Pegasus, but fundamentally, I think launching rockets from planes is not sensible.
Yeah.
It sounds like it would be a good idea, but it's not. And then even Orbital went away from doing that with as soon as you get past a certain size, they went to ground launch.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere that ATK, Morton Thickall, they were doing snowcats, they were doing ski lifts, and they sold that to the man who made the DeLorean.
Really?
Yeah. I just read that in their Wikipedia. I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. What to come around.
So, yeah. Right, so we got SpaceX going. And that was very difficult. We got the Falcon 1 rocket built. It was very simple. It's the simplest orbital rocket that's liquid fueled, so that it had the potential for reusability, for useful reusability. And then we had 3 failures. Finally got to orbit at the end of 2008. So
That was incredible. Going down to Kwajalein and watching.
yeah, you wrote it like a blog for a while.
Yeah, I actually still have it up there. It's still, and it's an old blogging platform that Google still keeps alive. It's called quajrockets.blogspot.com.
I think it's going to get a lot of traffic soon.
Yeah, totally. Send it. Check it out. It's all there. It's photos of. There was one photo of Elon picking up a satellite. We launched the rocket, and the rocket exploded, which was very, very, very sad. Everyone's super sad. People were like pouring their heart and soul into the rocket, and the satellite was, I think, a U.S. Navy or
Air Force Academy.
Air Force Academy, and it was thrown out of the rocket and fell through the roof of the hangar.
This is like where you really think.
A hangar, exactly. It's like a stand-up tent
and small tool shed.
Yeah,
Wasn't supposed to do that.
Like the size, maybe the size of this room. The rocket it had. This is the first launch failure, so it had there's a cracked aluminum B nut on that cracked during liftoff and created there was an engine fire. This wouldn't have been the end of the world, but there was one of the helium lines was a steel mesh overwrapped with a Kevlar sleeve, and it melted the sleeve. And so we lost pressure, pneumatic pressure, which caused the engine valves to close. So about 30 seconds after liftoff, the engine shut itself off due to the engine fire, and then it went ballistic and basically smashed in the rocks just about a couple hundred feet offshore. And when it was quite a big explosion actually. In that explosion, the satellite, which was in a fairing, went through the fairing on a ballistic arc back onto the island, smashed through the tool shed roof and onto the floor in a pretty reasonable condition. Like it wasn't totally gnarled.
Reuse it?
So we gave them back their satellite. So like, we didn't lose your satellite, but it may need some repair. But it was so improbable that the satellite would come back. We had a couple more failures after that. 2008 was a particularly difficult year because we had the third failure in 2008. The Tesla financing round collapsed.
Oh, it was such a nightmare.
And I got divorced, and it was just
I think 2008 was
Bad year.
really, really bad.
Yes.
That year.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could. I think 2018.
I think 2018 was worse.
What's up with 8?
Well, with the Model 3 ramp, right?
Oh, there were so many things that happened in 2018.
So much drama, it's insane.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Sorry, so we're in 2002 starting SpaceX. Moved down to LA. And it was pretty fun in the beginning. Like generally, startups are pretty fun in the beginning, and then you go through the, chasm of doom.
Chasm of doom.
Yeah.
Trough of sorrow.
Trough of sorrow. Exactly. It's rough.
Despair.
Yeah. It's usually always like everyone's like super optimistic and excited for first year or so, and then things start to go awry, and there's usually many years of grief before this finally day dawns. So it's like 2002, and then about in 2003 is when Rosen and JV Stravel called me up and said, "Hey, we want to have lunch." I want to say Harold Rosen, I think that's his name, but he weirdly had he was a pioneer in space technology and electric vehicles, which is odd crossover, and he'd done something called Rosen Motors, which is like sort of an electric vehicle company, and but he'd also been pioneer in geostationary satellites. So he called me up and said, "Hey, let's have lunch." So we had like lunch at like Smith and Wollensky or something in El Segundo, where SpaceX started, and so Stravel and Rosen were talking about space stuff, and then started talking about electric cars, and I said, "Oh yeah, so I was going to be working on electric car technology at Stanford," and then JV said, we should take a drive in the T0 from AC Propulsion. And I was like, yeah, because the timing is like lithium-ion batteries was really like the critical breakthrough needed for compelling electric cars. And so I was like, okay, I'll go try out their T0, which had specs similar to what we eventually brought to market as Tesla Roadster. So then, so I got a ride in the T0, and then I tried to convince Al Cacconi and Tom Gage to commercialize the T0. Now the T0, and there's like lots of stuff online about it. It didn't have doors or a roof, so like clearly you need to add those things, or any safety systems, and it was very unreliable because it was just like sort of a proof of concept basically.
I heard it was basically like hand assembled. You guys really had trouble scaling it.
No, it literally didn't have doors or a roof, or any airbags, or an effective cooling system for the battery, and it was not safe, and it was very unreliable. It would break down. It needed to be babied by an engineer, or you couldn't use it. So, but nonetheless, it did get like 0 to 60. I think under 4 seconds, 250-mile range.
It was enough to convince you that it was possible.
I mean, I knew it was possible because if you go from the energy density of lead acid to lithium ion, you've got about a 4x energy density improvement. So if you got say a 60-mile range with lead acid, you're going to have about a 250-mile range with lithium ion with the same weight. But it was cool to see it in action with AC propulsion. And I tried hard to convince those guys. Like I really pestered them a lot to commercialize the T0, and they just did not want to do it. Weirdly, the thing they wanted to make was an electric Scion, and I'm like, you guys, nobody's gonna pay $70,000 for an electric Scion, okay? That was their idea, $70,000 for an electric Scion. I'm like, this is not gonna work. Okay, you will sell like 14 of these things, and I'm like, I kid you not, I have like the email trails and these. Yeah, I mean, I think they're still around. So, in fact, but I even say, listen, even though I think this is the dumbest idea ever, I will fund 1/10 of it. If you can find 9 other people, and then I think the only other person they could find who would do it was Sergey Brin. So it's like, okay, Sergey and I are the only ones willing to do this, I think, and so they didn't actually get it off the ground. But and I said it's gonna fail, but at least it's something. And so then eventually I said kind of like, listen, if you guys are not going to commercialize the T0, do you mind if I do it? And they're like, no, yeah, that'll be totally fine. Like, okay. So then I was it's like, okay, so I'm go do this with JV, and we'll go create a commercial version of the T0, and then Gage and Cocconi said, well, there's some other people who also want to do it. Do you want to maybe team up with them? He said there were 2 other groups that wanted to do it, and I was like, okay, sure. Maybe this is a way that I can have my cake and eat it too. Famous last word.
Never works out.
God damn! Try to have your cake and eat it too, doesn't it?
This one's gonna be easy.
No, I mean, well, I didn't think it would be easy, but it was like, I thought maybe I can allocate like 20 to 30 hours a week and just work on product engineering, and then other people can do the other stuff. But I don't even like doing the other stuff anyway. So that didn't work out. So then Tom Gage said, he said there were 2 teams, but I only ever met one, and that was Eberhard, Topping, and Wright. But like the thing that really bugs me about them is like Eberhard in particular, the worst guy I've ever worked with, and I want to make a note of this. He is literally the worst person I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some real douchebags. Okay. To be number 1 takes a lot. It's not easy. His version of the story is that out of the blue he pitched me on funding his electric car company, and he convinced me to do it. Totally false. Mm-hmm. Okay, I was like, I'm creating an electric car company. It's like, then Gage said, well, maybe you could team up. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that might be worth doing, and so the company ended up being basically 5 people. This is Wright, Topping, Eberhard, Straubel, and myself, and so it was the 5 of us. And like Topping always tries to write out of the history books because they had a huge battle, and they made me choose which one was going to be CEO. It's Wright or Eberhard, and I talked to JB and I was like, which one? Because I really did not want to be CEO. So they're like, okay, well, both have issues, but maybe Wright has bigger issues than Topping. That's what JB said. So maybe, lesser of evils. I was like, okay, fine. I got to make a choice here because the 2 of them they refused to be in the same building. So it was like, a lot of drama. Tesla has so much drama. And I was like, okay, it's not like I said, like, Right, it's like I had to leave then. Anyway, so we got basically we jammed AC propulsion, powertrain, and battery pack into a Lotus Elise. With the first prototyping, like really just jammed it in, in retrospect, this was not a good idea because the car ended up weighing like 60% more than an Elise or on that order, and we didn't have enough volume to put the battery pack, and we had to we invalidated all of the crash tests because the weight distribution was different. It was heavier, so none of the crash tests were valid anymore. We had to redo the airbags. The air conditioner ran off a belt fan, so we didn't have a belt fan, so we had to have a new air conditioning system, so we had to change the HVAC system, and so basically, in the end, only about like I think 6 or 7% of the parts ended up being in common within the lease. Wow. So, and we went through a lot of trouble trying to shoehorn everything in there. And I mean, it's a cute car, but it's 10% too small. It's like, and then the costs ended up being crazy. Yeah, and then there was an audit of the costs of the production cost of the Roadster by one of the investors that joined in 2007, and then they called me up and said, hey, the numbers that Martin is telling you, that everyone's telling you about the Roadster are totally false.
Oh boy.
And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, no, we just did an audit. It's more than twice of what he's saying.
Yikes.
Yeah. It's like we would have to sell this car for $250,000 in order to not lose money. I was like, this is insane. Wow. So anyway, then we obviously had to fire Everhard. There was no choice about that. Yeah, and then it turned out not only had he misled me directly, he'd instructed others to also lie. No. Yes. When I say like somebody that's like the worst person I've ever worked with, it's pretty bad. Yeah. So, but SpaceX also hadn't gotten to orbit at that time, so I was like, man. So then I asked, what is the name? Harris. Remember the guy? I'm blanking on the name.
Yeah, we brought on a CEO.
Interim.
Yeah, he ran like a manufacturing company. I mean, he seemed pretty smart. The problem that I found with Tesla was we were a startup in Silicon Valley, building a car that was really manufacturing and materials engineering, and it's really like all the talent was for, you think there was probably talent, in Detroit or Japan. But if you took any of those guys in to run Tesla, they would run it like a car company, and then it would be destroyed.
Well, they had no idea. You can take somebody who's running a giant corporation.
You just could not take someone from a massive company culture and have them do a startup, and yet you couldn't find anyone in Silicon Valley who knew enough about making cars. And so we kind of found a middle of the road one he was an expert in manufacturing. Flextronics. That's right.
Ex-CEO of Flextronics was an investor. And he agreed to just join as interim CEO, and this is 2007.
Yeah. But I mean, Tesla was a company you tried so hard not to be CEO of.
Yes. But the thing is, this is misinterpreted. If I say that, it's misinterpreted as like I somehow don't love Tesla, which I do. It's just like trying not to go insane. With work.
Yeah, being CEO of a real startup is 80 hours a week. Being CEO of two is 160 hours a week, and there's only 169 hours or something of sleep of 168 hours a week. So, like, you just can't physically do it.
Yeah, I mean, the pain level is extreme. So, that's Anyway, I tried quite hard not to be CEO, but it had to be. No choice. That or Tesla would die. So that Everhard was fired in July 2007, and he was at the time we didn't know he'd instructed other people to lie, so we thought he was just it wasn't as bad. But once he left the building, then it turned out no, he'd actually orchestrated a massive deception, which is quite bad. He also said he came up with the name of Tesla Motors, which is false. That was created by a guy in '95, and moreover, he knows this because we went to great length. We had to buy the trademark.
Yeah, exactly.
So he can come up with the name. It was trademarked in '95. So it was like there's a whole bullshit backstory of it. But the guy. We almost had to change the name of the company because the guy who owned Tesla Motors wouldn't communicate with us, and so eventually we sent the nicest guy in the company, who's weirdly Martin's best friend, which I don't understand, but Mark Topping, super nice guy.
I like Mark a lot, actually.
Yeah, you can't not like Mark. It's impossible. He's a super nice guy. So we sent Mark to go sit on the guy's doorstep and not leave until he until he agreed to at least negotiate with us or something. He talked to us, and then we ended up buying the trademark for $75,000.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Was he the one who owned the domain too?
No, that was a whole different nightmare. But the domain guy, that took us 10 years to buy that Tesla.com domain. Man, and he is, I think, still like a networking engineer at Juniper. So, yeah, and that cost us like $10 million.
Yeah, that was
crazy.
like the guy just held out.
Was he just sitting on the domain, or was he using it for something?
It was impossible to. No, he wasn't using it for anything.
Just holding the name.
It's like Twitter handle Falcon Heavy isn't being used. We're fighting for that one.
Yeah, so man, took us ages to buy the Tesla.com domain. But we were gonna have to change the name to be something else. And actually, the lead candidate was Faraday as the name, because Faraday invented the electric motor, and then Tesla perfected the electric motor with the AC induction motor. So it was, if we couldn't do Tesla, we would do Faraday. And then ironically, a competitor was later created called Faraday.
Faraday, yes. A startup from China, right?
Yeah. So
Did you guys have a Faraday logo or anything? Were you that far down the
no.
track?
We didn't really even have a Tesla logo until later, because there's nothing to sell or anything. So, but in the end, the Tesla logo and the Tesla font was done by me working with basically a little firm. That's why the Tesla and SpaceX, there's some similarities between the fonts, and that's because it was done by the same people.
Cool.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on the Tesla and SpaceX fonts. Get the little things.
That's cool.
You want to eat now?
Yeah, sure.
Excellent.
I think it's all in the kitchen.
All right.
Awesome.
It would be much easier if the world was flat, or if you're in a flat situation. As soon as things are not flat, and you've got the world is like, it has undulations and curves, and then the car can be at any kind of angle, and then if you accelerate or brake, it's actually going to tip a little bit.
Yeah,
you've got sort of pitch and yaw compensation. That's where it gets really tricky.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing just amazing work. It literally just blows my mind every time, like, there's an update. Like, you think it's like, wow, I can't believe it's this good. And then it just gets better.
Like the big one was the faster lane changes. Like as you push the turn signal, it's like immediately. It's really awesome.
That's so satisfying.
Yeah,
And,
love
you know,
that.
I was kind of just like before, I was like, okay, it's not that good, but it feels good because like I can't believe a computer's doing this. Then we got the faster ones, and I was like, oh my god, it was so bad before. Like, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it'll be able to just do crazy maneuvers, like a high-speed chase, technically, because it's you don't always want to bias the thing to be conservative in the actions that it takes.
Yeah.
But there's quite a significant foundational rewrite in the Tesla autopilot system that's almost complete. As
Really?
well, yeah.
And what part of the system? Like perception, like planning, or just like?
It's instead of having planning, perception, image recognition all be separate, they're being combined. Yeah.
I don't even understand what that means.
Effectively, like the sort of neural net is absorbing more and more of the problem.
Right.
Beyond simply if you see an image, is this a car or not, or what, you know? It's kind of what do you do from that? 3D labeling is the next big thing. where the car can go through a scene with 8 cameras and kind of paint paint a path, and then you can label the path in 3D. This is probably 2 or 3 order of magnitude improvement in labeling efficiency and labeling accuracy. 2 or 3 orders of improvement in labeling efficiency and significant improvement in labeling accuracy, as opposed to having to label individual frames from 8 cameras at 36 frames a second. You just drive through the scene, rebuild that scene as a 3D thing with. It's like there might be 1,000 frames that were used to create that scene, and then you can label them all at once.
Is that related to the dojo thing you mentioned at the autonomy day?
No, dojo is for learning, for training the neural net. That's like when you're trying to build the neural net that you ship into the car, dojo speeds that up by hardware accelerating it.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you guys, is that up and running yet, or?
No, it might be. We might have the first one at the end of this year. But next year, I think it's very likely next year, maybe this year. But it's essentially meant to absorb massive amounts of video input, and then train against vast amounts of data, so that it can be used in the inference engine in the car. It's just like a human, really. It's like how long does it take you to learn a subject versus do a subject? It's like hard to learn, say, calculus, but once you learned it, then you can integrate something fast or something. It's like it's really the same basic thing.
Yeah, I mean, that'll just really tighten the feedback loop. Like, at some point, it just gets impossible to catch you guys. And, like, the rest of the people haven't even really, like, started, the rest of the auto industry. And, like, the feedback loop is just getting so tight with autopilot now. It's just, like, makes it a lot easier.
I think it will. They will catch up eventually. Well, at least they will catch up to where Tesla is now. I don't know. I mean, things like for example, we're talking about maps and directions, and how today, like, computer-based navigation is considered trivial. But back in '95, it was not trivial.
Right. Yeah.
It was considered very hard, and the compute power you had was tiny. So the code had to be super tight. Couldn't have fluffy code if you're trying to execute something on like a 386. It was like very, very puny amount of memory and compute. So now but now maps and directions are easy. I think at some point in the future, it might be a decade or something, then autonomy will seem easy.
Yeah, I mean, it'll obviously be commoditized in the long term.
Yes, it will seem easy in 10 years, but there will be a long stretch there where there'll be vast differences between cars. Well, the auto industry is used to slow rates of improvement, so there's still not really a car yet that matches the original Model S. Maybe you could argue like take
2012.
maybe.
Yeah.
If you look at like the EPA ratings, it literally is just all below.
Yeah. So that was 2012, and it's 2020. Mm-hmm. So it's still like pretty hard to get a car. Let's say there's not a car available at the price of the Model S that has the capabilities of the Model S of 2012.
It's kind of exactly what you were talking about with the Elise, where you're like, oh, we'll just put a battery in the Elise, and that kind of showed you like, okay, we really need a ground-up electric design. Yeah. And the rest of the industry hasn't done that. The sort of founding principles of Tesla were basically completely wrong. So the premise going in is like, it's not going to be that hard. We'll just take the Lotus Elise, it's a nice lightweight car, and we'll take AC Propulsion's drive unit technology, and we'll put them together, and we'll have an electric car, and it'll be great. This sounds pretty easy. Yeah. Except the AC Propulsion technology could not be industrialized. Like, it was like basically handcrafted electronics with an analog motor controller. Yeah.
And so depending if it was hot or cold, your car would respond differently or not at all. And the motors were hand wound. It was just like it's like impossible. You cannot scale this technology. You could have like finicky, individually made, super expensive prototypes, but we ended up using none of the AC propulsion technology. So, it's something that looks cool and works well at an individual prototype level does not necessarily scale. And then like I said, it was like maybe 7% of the parts of the original Roadster were in common with the Lotus Elise. It would have been way easier if we started from a blank slate. It would have been a better car. But I think like the real test of any given startup is how well does it respond to adversity and adapt and just figure it out. So like most things are just, when they start out, they don't make a lot of sense. But then as long as you adapt quickly, then you can make the company work. If you say like sort of Confinity, doing Palm Pilot tokens with an infrared port made no sense, but they adapted quickly to online payments. That was key. At X.com, was originally going to buy it off way more than it could chew by trying to do all the banking services, and then also focused on payments. It's like, if we do all these banking things, we're going to need a banking license. The banking license is going to slow us down. We're just focused on payments, so we can just get a payment, license from the state, and it's just like $50 or something, and you can be a money transmitter, literally. And so you just got to adapt quickly.
You kind of need to be naive, though. If you had known as much about manufacturing, you might not have done it.
Yeah. It would have been difficult to. I guess if you know the outcome's going to be good in the end, sure. It sort of depends on how much foreknowledge do you have about it. Manufacturing is insanely difficult. It's underappreciated in its difficulty.
Yeah, no, that's totally true.
Yeah. Even making the Roadster, which we only like peak made about 600 Roadsters in a year, but call it like 10 a week or something like that. 10 or 12 a week. So. If 2 got made in a day, that was a big day. And Tesla's making over 1,000 cars a day now.
What I find amazing is from start to finish, a car is made in 48 hours.
Yeah, depending on what counts start to finish.
Yeah, it depends. But you can see the rolled aluminum in one section of the factory, and you can see the cars coming out the other end, and it really is astounding. And cars have been built for a long time, but this is just astounding. It's still when you don't appreciate when you're driving a car how much goes into the level of detail, the 10,000 parts that come together, the shaping of everything.
10,000 unique parts.
Unique parts.
Wow. The pack alone is several thousand cells.
And it all comes together with people that are skilled, but skills are changing as things become a little bit. There's more autonomy, but it's not autonomy is not perfect. So you do need to have a lot of people there, and these cars have to be perfect. I mean, it's just given how much complexity there is in a car, it's remarkable that they cost as little as they do. There's so much that's in a car.
So what sort of processes did you remove, like first principles type approach from the Elise to like the Model S? Like, was it a massive jump there?
Yeah, I mean, it's gigantic. Tesla had never made a car, made a full car before. The Lotus made the non-powertrain portion of the Roadster, and then Tesla built the battery pack, motor, power electronics, charger, and then put it all together at the end. And the final assembly was actually at an old Ford dealership in Menlo Park. That was you can see some of the stuff in Revenge of the Electric Car.
Yeah, I've seen
great movie.
Yeah, it's great.
It just gives you crazy perspective to look back on it.
Crazy.
We need a third one.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of having a car assembly tiny plant in Menlo Park of all places, and that was just because we managed to sublease the Ford dealership closed down, and we managed to get it like this deal from Stanford. Because the Stanford was going to redevelop it, and they're we figured they'd probably take way longer than they expected to redevelop it. So we said, well, you're not bringing it to anyone. Like, can we pay you like 50 cents a square foot, and you can kick us out whenever you want? And it was this actually huge dealership, and it had enough room to do final assembly of the cars. So we just did final assembly of the cars there.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. And one of the most absurd places to build cars on Earth is Menlo Park.
So no test track or anything, just the road outside or something?
Yeah. Well, we'd actually, the early roasters were very unreliable, so we'd generally put about 50 miles of just normal driving.
Oh,
so just drive around the Bay Area with somebody following you.
You must have got some crazy looks from people, right? It's like, what is that?
Yeah. But we'd put 50 miles in each one of those cars because they just have a lot of things that would break down in the first 50 miles. And then battery production was in San Carlos. Yeah. So, man, there's just a lot of detail on that and all that. But going from the Roadster to Model S was a massive leap because the Model S is quite a sophisticated sedan where Tesla built the whole thing as opposed to just building the powertrain. And so competing against like Mercedes, BMW, Audi type thing. So that was a massive leap of difficulty. We did get the NUMMI plant, but really that just meant we got $8.
Yeah.
Because they stripped the plant of all the good equipment. The only equipment that Toyota and GM left behind was the stuff that they could not use anywhere else.
Wow.
So they only left the most junky, broken pieces of equipment behind. We managed to use some of it, but yeah, in the paint shop. I mean, some of the things were literally not even worth the scrap value. so it was like not worth it to call the scrap metal dealer.
What'd you do with it then?
We made a lot of those things work.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, plastic injection molding machines, and we just made them work.
Wow.
And the paint robots, we mostly made those work. The assembly, the body production line had to be made new because there was just nothing. So we made the body production line for Model S was created from scratch. And it worked out, but it was very difficult. It was also in the beginning, the top suppliers would not work with us, or we would get like their D team, because like who wants, if they got all these customers, like they got the big car companies, they got like Toyota, or they got Audi, BMW, Ford as customers, and a startup. Now you're in the supplier's position. Which team are you going to assign to the startup that everyone says is going bankrupt? You're going to assign the interns and rejects. Okay, it's not going to be your top team.
We have the same thing with our
Your top team's going to go to like Toyota. Your big customers, the top team. So we would get the worst team usually at the supplier company if the supplier would even work with us.
You think that influenced you to vertically integrate more?
No, it's vertically integrate or die.
Makes sense.
Yeah. We tried outsourcing. The battery production originally was going to be made at this place that made, I think, barbecue grills in Thailand.
I read the story.
Third Row Tesla Podcast. My name is Sian Proctor, and today we have a very special guest. But before I introduce our special guest, I'm going to go through and introduce our crew. So our regular Third Row Tesla Podcast crew. So today we have Omar Kazi, Tesla Truth.
Boom.
And we have Kristen.
Hi.
K10. Thank you. And we got Vincent Yu from Tasmanian. Hi. All right, great. And then we got Galileo Russell from Hyperchange.
What up, third row?
And then we got Viv, who's Falcon Heavy.
Hey.
Great. All right, Omar, do you want to introduce our guest?
Please welcome the...
All right, Omar, do you want to introduce our guest?
Please welcome...
All right, Omar, do you want to introduce our guest?
Please welcome...
All right, Omar, do you want to introduce our guest?
Please welcome...
All right, Omar, do you want to introduce our guest?
Please welcome...